We also have to create a culture, and we have to create the benchmarks for them before they even come in. So it's some of these classic benchmarks might be getting a high school kid to bench 225. The more high school males in your school that bench 225, you will have an absolute direct correlation to more kids in the gym. I will bet you $1,000 on that. If you can get more males in school to bench 225, you'll have more kids in the gym.
All right, folks, we're gonna keep moving. So our next speaker, Dane Miller. He's a strength and conditioning coach, he's a throwing coach, he's the founder of Garage Strength, which is a world-class training facility specializing in Olympic weightlifting and sports performance. He's trained under legendary coach Anatoly Bondarchuk. He's the founder of the Peak Strength app, a coaching tool that will revolutionize strength conditioning technology. He coached 6 Olympians from several countries in multiple track and field events. Six. With a reputation for developing elite athletes, Dane has coached multiple national and international champions in weightlifting, wrestling, and track and field. Creator of Parabolic Periodization System. He has redefined how strength training is structured for peak performance. He's a famous content creator, author, and father. Dane Miller.
Thank you, guys. So my name is Dane Miller, and I do have a sports performance facility in the middle of a cornfield, but it's not as big as the cornfields that are surrounding Kennerdale. I have coached at the last 2 Olympics and every single World Championships in track and field and Olympic weightlifting since 2016. And my main goal for today is that you guys can see like a sort of like a simplified version of how we think through getting somebody from, let's say, like 6th grade, 7th grade to get them to go to the Olympics, and trying to think through that lens when you're dealing with any kid who's coming into your high schools or into your colleges. And so if we scan this QR code, you should all have access to these slides. I would recommend trying to scan it because some of the images are not the best. But I wanted to go into this where I'll go back to this so you guys can see that. Some of the words I'm going to use, some of the terminologies, okay, some of the terminology I'm going to go into, I'm going to use terms that will be like, we're going to talk about a concept we use called sport depths, okay? We're going to talk about how we assess athletes, how we use levels of athletes, and then the levels predict what type of exercises that we're going to get into. And that's ultimately the goal. So those are like the 4 big key factors that I want you guys to think about when we're working towards this. And I know that you're eating lunch, so I'm going to try and make it as mildly entertaining as possible. Okay, so we're going to go into sport depths, assessments, levels, and then the exercise system. And I think actually having these things drawn out based off of everything, and at the end of this, hopefully you can see where we're going with this. So one of the biggest privileges that I had is that I was trained by Dr. Anatoly Bondarchuk. So he was a Soviet coach and just sort of like the head of the Soviet system of throwing. And I got to train with him for around a year, okay? And he sort of motivated me to create this journey around strength and conditioning and around these complex ideas, and to try and simplify them so that you could in turn implement them yourself as a coach, right? And I wanted to share this, and I actually brought this book with me, is that when I was training with Dr. B, this book, Strength Training for Sport, had come out. And it was super, super complex, and it took me a while to read, but I felt like because I majored in religious studies, if I wanted to get into strength and conditioning, I should probably read strength and conditioning books. So this is one of the first books that I read that started to impact the way that I thought about training. And so I had this early start where I was reading the Strength Training for Sport book, talking with Dr. B, and spending a lot of time asking him questions around training. And essentially, I've sort of realized since then that I think that there's really 4 key ways that we can impact athletes in the weight room.
What's up, guys? Our podcast and our channel are sponsored by our own strength training app, Peak Strength. The entire focus of Peak Strength is to provide you guys with the absolute best sports performance app that you could ever imagine. We build out the programs on the back end. We take in all of these different decisions that we learned here on site at Garage Strength so that we can then apply it to you so you can improve your training. So if you guys want to improve your overall sports performance, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. Download Peak Strength. You'll go to a free week of training, and then you can start getting on those gains, get those reps done so that you can become a champion. Now, let's get back to the video. Peace.
I don't really think there's much outside of these 4 key ways, and that would be 1, increasing explosiveness, 2, increasing strength or absolute strength, 3, increasing speed or improving speed, and then 4, improving endurance to a point. Okay, so these are the 4 key areas, and what I wanted to do, okay, when I realized this is, okay, if I'm training athletes in different sports, how could I sort of lump them into different sports or columnize them into different sports that might be similar? Meaning, one sport might have a lot more explosiveness and strength. Let's say shot putters that we're training versus if we're training a marathoner or a triathlete, they're not going to need as much strength or as much explosiveness. They still do need those things, but they don't need it to the degree. And so this is something that really led me to developing the sport depth system and thinking through sort of how these things flow. And actually, a lot of the stuff Coach Ken talked about, Joe just talked about, I'm going to try to echo as well as he did. So we start off with our training system, okay, with this acronym, and the acronym is SAIL. And so really, I like to think about if I'm assessing an athlete, or I'm planning for an athlete, or I'm implementing, it really all starts with SALE. Okay, so we're looking at the sport depth system, which is a systematic framework. Okay, so this is the framework where we're going to try to lump sports and athletes into their specific area that they'll have similar qualities and similar athletic abilities. I'm actually thinking about this gym. Like if I'm training, let's say 3 or 4 different sports in this gym at the same time, I want to be able to look at the cross country team and know exactly how their system would be laid out and plan, at the same time football, and at the same time maybe we're working with sprinters over here, and know that their planning is based off the sport depth system. So then we'll get into assessments with this. The next part of this is that assessments are going to be exercises that we use that we think have a very good indication for that specific sport depth. Okay, so let's use the scenario of the shot putter versus a marathoner. We know that if a shot putter has a big bench press, they're probably going to throw far. The marathoner doesn't really need to push their bench press as high as the shot putter. So that's sort of where we're looking at with the assessments. The next step after we have these assessments is identifying the level of the athlete, and we want to look at the level related to past experiences with athletes that we've had, and also just, all right, if this athlete's running a 40 at this time, they're at this more advanced level, or if they're running a 40 very slow, they're likely at this level, and now the exercise is going to be based off of that level. So we'll see sport depths, assessments, levels, and then the exercise system. And the exercise system is where we're going to get into the actual exercises that we like to use based off of the level that they're at. And I sort of came to these conclusions with the exercise system, and I see this as a trend in strength and conditioning where a lot of us get brainwashed by watching Instagram, because Instagram's awesome and I love it, and YouTube, because Instagram and YouTube are awesome. But we see these flashy functional movements and we were like, oh, we should try these movements. And then we waste an athlete's career or year of training by having them do ridiculous movements when they could just be doing a front squat. Okay, so that's sort of where we're going to go with all this. I'll try not to attack too many influencers. Okay, so going through all this, I want to go back a little bit because Dr. B would consistently talk about when he would consult with the Soviet wrestling team, and he would always bring up, look, sports have energy requirements. Some have different energy requirements, and they need to be trained in that light. Okay, so this is going to be an example of where we would see with these assessments. Okay, When we set up our programming at Garage Strength, one of the biggest things that we do is we have 6 foundational exercises. And every single sport depth will have 6 specific exercises based off of what the needs are of that specific sport. So in this case, we're using an example where you might see a clean, a vertical jump, a back squat, a bench, a single leg squat, a broad jump. These are tests that we're going to put these kids through, okay? And we're going to test them in a matter of 2 to 3 days in the middle of a workout, and that's going to help feed the entire system. So if you check out this graphic, this will show us a pretty comprehensive example of how we lay out the sport depth. So we build from the top down, okay, and we think about, okay, sports that might be in sport depth 1 would be much more explosive based, strength based, okay? Strength and power, okay? So we're throwing, lifting, powerlifting, goalies in soccer, goalies in field hockey, goalies even in lacrosse, ice hockey. And then we have those specific assessments based off of that sport depth. Okay, we get into sport depth 2. This would be, think about a running back, a baseball player, an ice hockey player. We're going to do a little bit more locomotion in this case, so we're going to have more tests that are based around running, based around sprinting. Okay, and then when we get into something like a combat sport, this is where we see the continuum of strength and explosiveness start to lean more towards endurance work. So now we're going to start to see, okay, we're going to test their strength and their explosiveness with a power clean, with a single leg squat, and pull-ups, because that transfers really well to that specific sport, but we're also going to test their 5K run and their broad jump. And then as we get into sport depth 4, this is where we'll start to see, basketball players, they're running, I think it's anywhere between 3 and 5 miles a game. Soccer players, 5+ miles a game. Lacrosse is similar. Swimming, these are more aerobic-based sports. They still need strength. They still need to be explosive. But the tests that we're going to associate with success are going to be tilted a little bit more towards speed and endurance, okay? And then finally, sport depth 5 would be what we were talking about, where you're looking at a 5K runner, a 10K runner, a marathoner, cross-country runner. And so we want to try to identify, all right, if this athlete is in this realm, they're in this specific sport depth, okay? And then when we're looking at it, then we can start to think through that process of like, these are the key assessments that we're going to use, so we need to build our program around that entirely. And that means understanding how the level of each athlete within the sport depth and what their exercise selection would be. And I want to make the argument that most kids in high school should really be doing about 10 to 14 exercises, and that's it. Like, really nothing else outside of those 10 to 14 movements, okay? So level 1 is going to be you're getting the foundational exercises. A lot of the foundational exercises are also going to be the assessments, okay? Those are the key indicators for success in the sport depth, so we should be training them as directly as possible. We should not be doing tantrum hamstring curls, Taman. We should not be doing that. We should be doing back squats and single leg squats. So, so those are things that I really want to pitch here, is that level 1 is going to be they're focusing on foundational exercises. And we are going to do foundational exercises every single day that they come into the gym until they move and they test out of that level 1 and they get to that level 2, which is where they'll go and they'll start to get a little bit more of advanced movements, okay? And then from the advanced movements, as people progress to the Division I level, to the professional level, to the Olympic level, that's when we start to use a lot more peak exercises as well. Okay, so I wanted to go into a little bit where we lump our exercises into 5 key categories, and these 5 key categories feed the 4 areas that we even mentioned in the beginning: strength, explosiveness, speed, and endurance. And so we look at The 5 key exercise umbrellas is starting with technical coordination. I like to use the term technical coordination for weightlifting movements because power lifters tend to listen to me a little bit more when I say technical coordination, and if I say weightlifting, they shut me off and they don't want to hear anything I have to say, so that's why I'm using technical coordination. I actually like to use cleans, snatches, jerks, things like this a lot because I think it provides us a good feedback on how the kids learn, on how to communicate with kids, and it also helps them just actually be athletic instead of squatting and deadlifting heavy in one spot. Now, the next thing that we'll get into would be, the next exercise umbrella would be absolute strength. This would be more traditional movements like a back squat, a bench press, a deadlift, pull-up, something like that. The next area of the exercise umbrellas would be plyometrics. So we're looking at rapid explosive movements, jumping movements, and I would lump ballistic exercises under here, so throwing medicine balls, things like that. The fourth area would be speed, so we're working on sprinting, running, agility, things along those lines, and then finally the endurance aspect. So we try to think through, these are the exercise umbrellas, and then we break off and we say these are the foundational movements for each umbrella. These are the advanced, these are the peak, okay? And then if we have a kid that we're putting through an assessment when we first get them, or we first see them, now we can put them through this simple assessment, see how they squat, see how they learn to clean, see how they learn to do a jump, see how they learn to do a walking lunge, and we can now take that and say, okay, we only need to develop the foundational movements on this athlete for the next 6 months, depending upon how long we see their progress taking. Okay, so I wanted to give you that background and then try to go into some of the specific stuff that you can look at and say, all right, where's this dude going with this? Now we're going to give you some specific exercises. And we're going to go through foundational exercises, show you some examples, advanced exercises, show you examples, peak exercises, show you some examples, and then get into some more of that practical aspect. So here, if we have an athlete come in, foundational movements and technical coordination are just going to be cleans and snatches. And we will have athletes clean and snatch 8, 9, 10 years old on the first day, full cleans. Okay, we want to teach them the right progression. We want to teach them the right cues. We want to get them familiar with the movement because we know that based off of our evidence at the gym, the sooner someone can achieve a certain amount of reps, the better they're going to be at that movement. So we don't want to waste time doing exercises that aren't going to help that specific exercise, in this case, the clean or the snatch. So they will do this day one. Okay, same thing with when we're looking at the foundational movements of absolute strength exercises, single leg squats, front squats, bench press, back squat, pull-ups. If we have a heavier kid, reclining pull-ups. Again, these are going to be based off of the first day of training, you're going to front squat or back squat. The first day of training, you're going to bench or you're going to do pull-ups. It's going to happen, and we're going to do it every single session. Plyometrics, we're looking at simple jumps, like just a box jump or a low hurdle hop or a broad jump, okay? We want to see how an athlete's going to do a box jump. We want to see how, when they land, how deep do they go? How quickly do they react? What does that look like, okay? Skips are also another example of plyometrics that I feel like a lot of people have sort of gotten away from. But if we're using plyometrics effectively with lower level athletes, skipping is absolutely amazing, as is jumping rope. And I would place that in there with the plyometrics. And then when we're looking at the speed exercise umbrella, the foundational movements are going to be something anywhere between a 10 to a 40-yard dash, and then some shuttles, 5, 10, 5. Okay, and then endurance-wise, we want to look at, typically this is going to be a little bit harder, but a 60-minute test, a fan bike test, or if we have true endurance athletes, we want to know what their 1 mile test is. If we have true endurance athletes, they should know that even at an early age. Okay, so these are examples of athletes doing foundational movements, okay? Lower hurdles into higher hurdles. That might be a little bit more advanced, but we can progress there. The middle slide is actually 12-year-old doing a snatch. The slide on your right is another 13-year-old snatching. And these athletes are coming in 4 days a week, and they're going to snatch 4 days a week. They're going to come in, they're going to know the plan, they're going to know that they have to do these movements, and the only way that they're going to get better at snatching is if they snatch all the time. The only way we're going to get better at cleaning is if we clean all the time. And this in turn will lead to a lot of success. Instead of doing tantrum hamstring curls, we're going to do snatches. Okay, so some more examples here would be running a 10, running a 15, right there, okay? Doing single leg squats, simple movements that are going to develop a ton of strength, which will then carry over to their specific sport based off their sport depth. Okay, so if we get into some of the advanced levels of exercises per umbrella, now we're going to look at athletes doing partial range of motion movements. So I like to think about being able to work up to the next level is being able to make the range of motion a little bit shorter, but in that shorter pull, the impulse then also has to be higher because the time to accelerate is going to be shorter, so we have to put out a little bit more force. Okay, so we're looking at technical coordination movements. Now we're going to start to use hangs. We're going to go off of boxes. Okay, we might use with absolute strength movements, slow tempo eccentric, which is pretty advanced, pretty hard to do, but when young kids do them, they will blow up. Okay, pause squats. A lot of high school athletes struggle with mobility. One of the best ways, because it's hard to get high school kids to do their mobility work, one of the best ways to get them to do mobility work is to make them do it in the middle of their session by doing pause squats and doing slow tempo eccentric pause squats and also pause benches, okay? So some of the plyometric stuff, we're gonna get a little bit more complex with the jumps and a little bit more sport specific. Some of the speed stuff we might bring in. Now we're gonna do some resisted sprints. Now we're gonna do possibly some wicket sprints and then distant tempo work and threshold work. I would say endurance-wise, they're still not, in most of these cases, they're not on a true periodized program. We're just setting this up, just trying to get as many reps in as possible for another, let's say 6 months to 24 months. Okay, so these are some examples here. And I would say, so the front squat will show you a pause. The jump from the knees is a more advanced movement I like for wrestlers that struggle to get out of referee position, or wrestlers that just aren't super twitchy, but they've worked their way out. They've scored a decent score on their vertical jump. Well, now we can do some work that's a little bit more sport specific. The athlete on the top right was a linebacker at Penn State, doing a movement like this to help with his lateral movement and make decisions. Could be argued this is a little bit more outside the advanced. It might even be more challenging that, but these are some examples of advanced movements that we typically would not do with high school kids that are under sort of, let's say 11th to 12th grade. Because I think before this, we should just be squatting, benching, doing pull-ups, doing cleans, doing single leg squats, and getting very, very good at that so that then we can do these. Okay, so now going to the peak exercises, okay? Now we're looking at increasing the range of motion or decreasing the range of motion even more. So you're gonna do more power movements, meaning power snatch, power clean, hip power work, and even repeat work from the hip for weightlifting exercises. Okay, so these are gonna be more advanced athletes that can use a stretch shortening cycle really, really well. Another thing, we talked about slow eccentrics and pauses on the absolute strength stuff. In this case, at this level, when they sort of test out to the more peak level, now they're gonna be doing speed benches, unbroken reps, time. We might time how fast can somebody bench 350 for 5 reps, okay? Now that athlete is really, really advanced, and this is how we wanna peak them. Plyometrics will start to be more advanced, like the movement that you saw Jan doing. I also think when we're peaking athletes, we could do preferred exercises that the actual athlete likes to do. Wickets and possibly some overspeed work is where we would see the very advanced level of peak exercises for speed. I don't think anyone needs to do overspeed work until they really get to this advanced level. There's a lot of other things that we can work on. And then with endurance work, this is where you'll start to see periodized setups. Like now they're doing polarized training, or now they want to do double threshold work. They still need to do speed and explosive exercises that are going to be labeled advanced or peak. Okay, so these would be examples. We got boxes or from the hang. Top left, this is Jaime Perez, Olympic bronze medalist, doing a hang snatch. Nick Singleton, top right, he's the starting running back at Penn State. He got to this level when he was at the end of his sophomore year. He's probably one of the most advanced athletes that we've had. Eric Fader's Olympian, snatching 170 kilos. That's 2 boxes, so you've got to move very quickly and have good mobility. World bronze medalist Haley Reichert, snatching, what is that, 89 kilos? Okay, so this is examples of like more peak-based movements that we use. Okay, so I want to go back through now and recap this, where essentially what we try to do is we're looking at the exercise degree here. We're looking at the sport depth. What sport is this athlete training for? Kid walks in the door, field hockey player, they're training for sport depth 2. Sport depth 2 is here. Okay, we have a running back, they're sport depth 2. This is going to be the level based off of the assessments. Now we know what exercises based off of that assessment that athlete's going to do for the next extended period. And then once we assess every 12 to 16 weeks, that's when we can start to figure out when do they move out of that foundational movement pattern and get into advanced or get into peak. Okay, so I think one of the things I wanted to go into with this too is that I think a lot of this stuff is great, but it really doesn't matter if we're not setting the culture for the athletes when they come in the gym. Okay, so we want to think through, all right, these are benchmarks and these are actual points that the athlete can advance with their exercise selection. But to pull them through, we also have to create a culture and we have to create the benchmarks for them before they even come in. So it's some of these classic benchmarks might be getting a high school kid to bench 225. The more high school males in your school that bench 225, you will have an absolute direct correlation to more kids in the gym. I will bet you $1,000 on that, okay? If you can get more males in school to bench 225, you'll have more kids in the gym. So the assessments and all that stuff doesn't really matter as much if we don't tell kids what it takes to bench 225. Same thing with women benching 135, okay? Cleans, same thing, 225, 135. Squats, 225 for women, 315 for men, okay? These are key benchmarks to try and get them to go from level 1 with the foundational movements to level 2 with more advanced movements. And we need to hammer that into the athlete, like, hey, you're not gonna get out of this, you're not gonna not do these 10 to 14 exercises until we can really clear out of these specific areas. And so this is some of the stuff around this. And what we do is we can actually talk to a kid and say, okay, you're in 7th grade, you bench 130 or 135, let's say. We know that if you show up 4 days a week and we do this type of work within the next 4 to 6 months, depending based off of your athletic ability, you're gonna get these, you're gonna be able to grow to this point, okay, by these ages. So it's providing that clarity. And now on the back end, we have the sport depth system, we have the high end system of the assessments, we have everything working on the back end with the program and how they come into the gym. And on the front end, they see a sheet that says this is how many reps it's going to take you to get to this point. And we have to communicate to them, show up so that you do your reps and then you can grow out of those specific areas. And this is a good example here that we like to use with, let's say, a 185-pound male. Okay, so this would be for a 185-pound male to clean 225. And the one thing I want to take note on here too is that this is at 25 reps a week. Okay, so if you have a kid that comes in once a week, they're going to realize it's going to take a long time to get to clean 225. Whereas if they train 2 to 3 days a week, it's going to be expedited a little bit more. And now you can start to play this game of urgency of like, hey, try to show up a little bit more frequently. Now we can start to achieve these benchmarks sooner. And then same thing for the squats, okay? For the squats, now we're communicating, we're going to try and minimum get 50 reps a week. Ideally, I think we could even get a little bit more. And we're just going to spend a lot of time back squatting. We're not going to do anything else. We're going to clean, we're going to back squat, and then we're going to go do reverse hypers and glute hams, and you're going to get out and you're going to do that same workout probably once a week minimum. Okay, so these are some of the benchmarks that we try to educate the athletes on. Look at the time, look at the number of reps, look at how every rep, if you get 175 reps, theoretically you might see a 10-pound increase. And that helps create that culture and pull that kid through those specific assessments, and then we'll see them increase their levels. Okay, so I wanted to go through, show you all those examples, show you the back end of how we set everything up, show you an actual real life example. We tested this athlete 14 weeks ago. She just tested last week, or 2 weeks ago. So 12 weeks passed. We took her through this specific individual, only snatched, only clean, only back squatted, only front squatted, only benched, and did stair jumps. Nothing else. Every single day she comes in, the culture's set, she knows I have to warm up doing the snatch progression, I have to snatch. Okay, after snatch I clean, after I clean I do front squat, or on this day, back squat. Okay, so she came in, 12-year-old girl, shot putter, weightlifter, so she's 12 years old, she weighs 165 pounds. And I want you to just remember, 1,265 pounds, okay? We trained for 12 weeks straight. She showed up 4 days a week. This is a big thing. Get your kids to show up 4 days a week, implement them and implement to them how long it takes, how consistent they have to be. Hold them accountable, okay? Kids like to lift weights, especially when you hold them accountable and especially when you celebrate their victories along the way. Kids, I'm over the kids these days don't want to work. Bullshit. Show up to the gym. We've got 300 active members and 90% of them are kids. They want to work, but they need adults to help them to work, okay? They need adults to hold them accountable. We can't feel entitled to their time. We have to educate them on why they need to be in the gym instead of complaining about them. So 4 days a week, 48 sessions in 12 weeks, okay? The only thing that we focus on, snatch, clean, like I mentioned, front squat, single leg squat, bench. Foundational movements were back squats. The plyometrics were stair jumps. Occasionally she would do box jumps, so it was mainly stair jumps, and then bench, okay? Progressive overload, you use good technique. Now, 12 weeks her clean went, increased by 40 pounds, okay, which is stupid. She cleaned 147, okay, so I think that's 67 kilos off the top of my head. And when we tested, she cleaned 85 kilos, which is insane. 7th grade girl, okay? Back squat, 209 to 242. Remember, she does weigh 165 to 168 pounds, so she is a little heavier. Genetically talented. Genetics don't mean shit if you don't show up, okay? Clean, so you can see here, clean went up 40 pounds to 187 pounds, and we followed the number of reps that she had to get every single week, okay? We followed the back squat numbers every single week, 50 reps a week, okay? Single leg squat, and honestly, a lot of these we would probably go overboard, especially if her dad forgot to pick her up at the gym. She would do like 2 workouts at a time, so that is a little cheat code. Convince parents to forget their kids at the gym. Bench press went up only 10 pounds in this case because we do spend more time on the other lifts. And then the vertical jump, this was the big one for me. 12-year-old girl, weighs 168 pounds, has a vertical jump of 24.5 inches, is pretty damn good. Like, that's really, really good. That's a 3-inch increase solely by focusing on single leg squats, front squats, back squats. She's 12 years old, just front squatted 200 pounds for a triple because all we do is front squat. We are not spending time doing, I'll beat the dead horse, the hamstring tantrum curls. Okay, so this is level in here. Example of her, she throws, she lifts, she throws, she lifts, okay? I have a prediction for her that she'll probably throw 60 feet in high school, but she works. She comes in and she does that work. And so the big factor there is that if we're looking back is we knew she's a sport depth 1, okay? We know based off of her being in sport depth 1 and her age, okay, and her assessments, that we need to do a lot of cleans, a lot of snatches, a lot of front squats, a lot of back squats, a lot of benching, and a lot of jumps. We lay out the system based off of that, and then we convince the kid every single day when they come in, they know the process. We're gonna clean or snatch. We're gonna squat or back squat or front squat. We're gonna single leg squat or we're gonna do some type of bench. Okay, and then we can flow through, and then we also implement these tests, these assessments, which elevates the culture of the gym, because every 12 to 14 weeks you're testing. Okay, so then when you're testing, it elevates the intensity, and everybody wants to make sure that they show up and they hold themselves accountable. Okay, so that's how this flows. And this would be a specific example. I want to go into some, like if you would have a football, let's say a football team come in, we'll go into a specific example, we'll work through that, and you're going to get the exact numbers that we even use as the guidelines here. So we'll have sport depth 2, these would be cricket, bobsled, sprint cycling for on the bike, sprint cycling, football, rugby, baseball, okay? We're going to do assessments based off of their 40, their bench, and if you're in a gym like this and you don't have access to a 40, let's say you do an assessment off of 20, I think that's perfectly fine. We're going to test their clean, their vert, and their single leg squat. And so when we're looking at that, this is where we have specific numbers, okay? So we're looking at a level 1, and they want to start varsity. We want to get these kids to run a 40 like 5.50, okay? Ideally. We want them to bench body weight to 1.3 times body weight. We want a shuttle that's 4.7, that's quick. And that's the other thing is like some of these kids that might be in middle school that are seeing the numbers, they might be like, man, these are pretty tough numbers. And they start to recognize there's other kids around them that have hit these numbers, but for them to hit the numbers, they've got to work towards them, and it becomes a video game. Now they see the levels that they can work towards, and we are the ones who build it out for them. And we see this, okay, if we run a sub 4.7 shuttle, I get to the next level. And it's gamified for them, and now their efforts are based off of this long-term game. Okay, long-term game. Clean would be a 1.25 times body weight clean. Vert would be 28 inches. Then they're going to be single leg squatting 225 for triple, which is feasible. That doesn't sound, it's not as crazy as it sounds. Same kid, let's say they progress, they're a sophomore in high school, they want to go D1, they want to start to think about going D1, okay? 40-yard sprint, ideally they're running a sub 4.85, so they're probably not at D1 yet, but they're working towards that thought process. They're going to be we're going to try to get them to bench 1.4 times body weight, 20-yard shuttle, sub 4.5, so they're going to be pretty quick, pretty agile. Work through the clean at 1.55 times body weight. Remember, we're cleaning basically 2 to 3 days a week. Vertical jump would be around 32 inches because of that. And then we're getting into the single leg squats. And we push single leg squats constantly, pretty aggressively. Now, finally, this would be if they are at that now they're getting into the more advanced exercises, more peak-based exercises. Now we're seeing a kid running a 4.7, 40 or below. If they weigh over 265 pounds, we want to see them running a 4.85. These are kids that are going basically D1. Okay, bench press, 1.6 times body weight. Heavier kids, we tend to back off a little bit where it's 1.5 times body weight once they get over a certain threshold. And we build off of these numbers, okay? You're looking at the shuttle, you can see the shuttle based off the body weight, the time will drop a little bit. Vertical jump, we want to keep around 33 inches. Might be down to 30 if somebody is 300 pounds, okay? That is reasonable. Single leg squat will stay right around 1.7 times body weight for a long time, mainly because there is a clear point, in our opinion, that there's a clear point of diminishing returns based off those numbers. And then again, looking at the kid who would be actually somebody like Nick, someone like Nick, if he's weighing 225, ideally he's running a sub 4.6, which he runs a sub 4.5. He's actually run a 4.39. He's benched 4.05 for reps. He's run a 20-yard shuttle and a 4.09. So he's an athlete that can go to the NFL. He has that capability, and he's known that in his head based off of these numbers that he can strive towards. So you're looking here, clean 1.5 times, and now you can set these numbers up for your kids in high school and say, look, this kid did this here, these are the numbers they hit, that's what you have to work towards. This is how many sessions it's going to take you to get there, okay? And every time that you miss, or you go on vacation, or you do all the other things that aren't as fun as being a champion, that pulls away from that journey, okay? So it's pulling them through with these numbers and then basing that session off of everything. Okay, so I want to play this as an example where when Nick started with us, all we did was clean. Constantly, every day, clean, single leg squat, cleans. Once he got to the point where he cleaned 160 kilos as a junior, we started using more boxes. Then this is him running for 3 touchdowns against Notre Dame. This system is, a lot of this is based off of, or a lot of this success is based off the fact that we clean, we snatch, we squat, we bench, we do a lot of pull-ups, and we just repeat it, and we got to make sure that we're getting kids into the gym based off of educating them on the numbers. These are numbers that shouldn't just be used within the strength coaches. These are numbers that the kids should know. These are numbers that should be up on the wall. There should be banners of kids who've hit these numbers. There should be clubs to join the 225, to join the 315. So now the high school kids think, like, I got to get up there on that wall, and then that banner leads to more success out on the field in whatever sport that they're doing. Let me see if I didn't mean to replay that. Well, I'll watch it again. Let's see. Okay, so this is literally how our entire system of peak strength is built, and we use this inside of our peak strength, inside of peak strength, our app. We are over there. This is how we build our culture on site at Garage Strength. This is how everyone is executing things on a regular basis. It's systematic. Athletes know what they have to do based off of the numbers. Okay, athletes know what they have to do. Coaches know where each kid is by testing them every 12 weeks. We know based off the assessment, based off their sport depth, we know what level the athlete is. It makes it easier amongst the coaches to program based off of that. We're not giving kids exercises they don't need. And then we even will use things like progressions of the clean or the snatch as warm-ups so that they get super ingrained with the technique. And this is stuff that we've had with a ton of success even at the Division I level. I'm the strength coach for South Dakota State. This is what we've done over the last 3 years, where we've had 9 NCAA All-Americans over the last 3 years, and implementing this with them with wrestling versus football versus shot putters, so we can see this success amongst all those different sport depths. And so if you want to join our wait list, this is a wait list where we put out a lot of content. There's some questions. If you guys do join it, you'll get questions. You'll get prompted with questions. You will be on an email list. But my whole presentation is like, think through the lens of establishing the sport depths, coming up with what are those assessments, okay, based off that. You'll actually get a download too. You'll get the sport depth download that has our assessments that we use on site. So you'll see the specific assessments, and then base those assessments off the levels then predetermine what type of exercises or what degree of exercise that athlete should be doing, and then it's just rinse, wash, and repeat for 5 to 7 years. And convincing kids in 6th, 7th, 8th grade to come in and train for 5, 6, 7 years is how we can help improve really some of the stuff that Avery even talked about this morning. So thanks, guys.